All right, one of the key skills and standards that we will work on this year is to examine the relationships between literary texts and historical contexts. So between books or plays or novels or poems and the time in which they were written. It's a key skill to help us understand and wrestle with the meaning that we can derive from what we read. So let's imagine that this is an author. Sorry for my very crude PowerPoint today. All right, this is an author and he writes a book. Now, this author does not exist just in this blank space, right? This author does not exist outside of time, outside of space, outside of historical context, and therefore the book does not exist outside of time or space or historical context. This author has probably read other books, and those books have influenced him. This author is living in a time of a particular scientific understanding of the world, and that impacts him or her. And so that if an author didn't know anything about the sun rotating or the earth rotating around the sun, what they write might be different than a contemporary author. We have different understandings of government, and we live under different styles of government. So that might impact the way that author thinks, the way that author writes, what the author thinks or writes about. We have different music that is going on. And so the style of the writing might be even impacted by the type of music that that author or that poet listens to. The author has friends, and if these friends are all 20-something New Yorkers in the 1990s who are relatively affluent, their writing might be different than somebody who has a different group of friends. They might have a particular understanding of our founding fathers, and this might impact the way that they see and think about our nation. They come from a particular religious background, or the society at that time comes from a particular religious or perhaps non-religious background. And those understandings, those religious understandings, those philosophical understandings, definitely course through that writer's work. They are touch points that that writer uses. They're understandings that that writer has that they might not even express, but they are there within their work. So let's think about this concretely with Arthur Miller's The Crucible. All right, so this is a fun play, right? There is craziness, there's adultery, there are people throwing hysterical fits. It is a fun time. It is fun to watch and a good way to pass the time. I mean, you have Giles Corey, who seems like a pretty bad man, you know, asking more weight and dying and just sticking up for what he believes in. There are these girls who think they see a yellow bird, which seems crazy. There is John Proctor, who needs better dental insurance. All right, so it's a fun book. And for all these reasons, we could read it and just think about, oh, yeah, that's interesting, that's entertaining. But if we think about the historical context, different things might come to our minds. So if we understand that in the time period of Salem, when this book takes place, children are to be seen, not heard. Children are not empowered. Children are somewhat expendable. They often die. And additionally, when we think about the role of women in society, women do not have power in this society. All right. So a vast variety of things we start to understand about the historical context. And then we can understand, well, maybe this story is interesting. Maybe this story is saying something about power and who wields power. Maybe it's saying something about the expectation foisted upon girls upon women, expectations of purity, expectations of meekness, and we can start asking questions about those expectations in that context. And that leads us to a deeper and more interesting understanding of the story, rather than it simply being entertaining. Now, so that's one example of how the historical context of Salem plays a role in how you might think about the book. Then we can also think about Arthur Miller, the playwright, and the person who wrote the play. And he was married to Marilyn Monroe. I don't know exactly if this can help you think through the play, but it is interesting to me and goes to show that even, Arthur Miller can date one of the most famous people in the world, on the power of his pen. More conducive for thinking through our understanding of this play would be Joe McCarthy, who was a senator from Wisconsin, and who said that communists were infiltrating the United States government and really were infiltrating the United States society. And this was a time then of heightened fear and paranoia of communists. All right. And Joe McCarthy preyed upon that paranoia, and he made all kinds of baseless claims without evidence about who was a communist. Now, Arthur Miller was swept up into this. Arthur Miller was brought before Congress, and he was asked to name names. Who are people that you know are communists? Who have you seen at communist meetings and the like? Now, Arthur Miller could name names, or Arthur Miller could not name names. Not naming names would mean he would be in contempt of Congress. Naming names means he would do something that he felt was against his conscience. So, all of a sudden, we have some interesting historical context for a play that is about, are you naming names? What are you doing when you are persecuted? What happens when there is paranoia and fear and imbalances of power? And so then we read quotes like that's from Danforth, who is the main person of the court, and he says, "You must understand, sir, that a person is either with the court or he must be counted against it. There will be no road in between. This is a sharp time, a precise time. We live no longer in the dusky afternoon when evil mixed itself with good and befuddled the world." And we can think about the Red Scare of that time. And when people thought, you're either with us, you love this country, or maybe you're a communist. And a communist hates America and all it stands for. Or we can think about the quote from Tituba, who says, "I saw Sarah Good with the devil. I saw Goody Osborne with the devil. I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil." And we can think about Arthur Miller and the pressure on him to name names. And we can think about John Proctor saying, "Because is my name, because I cannot have another in my life." And we can think about what Arthur Miller would have been feeling and experiencing and the pressure on him to give other people up as communists and ruin their life. And so understanding this historical time period really helps, and the author really helps us understand the book in a much richer way. So not only is that author embedded in a deep historical context, but you as a reader are as well. So let's pretend this is you on the screen. And you, instead of writing a book, are reading the book. You have also read other books, and you've taken in their ideas. You are living in a particular time when we have a particular understanding of science. You are living under a democracy. Maybe you don't like Louis Armstrong, maybe you like other music, all right? You have a particular group of friends, a particular understanding of the history of our country and what it should be. You have a particular religious or non-religious background that shapes how you see the world, all right? And you bring all of that to the text as well. So not only is the author bringing their historical context, their understandings of the world, you are bringing your own understandings of the world as well. And so, to keep on the theme of the crucible, we see people referencing the crucible and using it to help them make sense of their own situation. So, previously in our recent American history, you had President Trump talking about a witch hunt that was out to get him. It was baseless and based on paranoid fears, according to him, right? So he is interpreting the witch hunts. He's interpreting the crucible as him, all right, being persecuted, all right. In this time of COVID, you can have people think about public shaming and about fear. And I saw Goody Lewis not social distancing with the devil. And you can interpret the crucible in certain ways. All right. You can think as you read through the crucible about what is reasonable suspicion and how does fear and paranoia play into policing and play into criminal justice. And you can look at the crucible as a commentary on criminal justice based on your historical context. So you can arrive at very different conclusions about what you read based on your own historical context. All right? So it's important then to go back and look at the author and think through what is their historical context. How does their understandings of the world play into what they're writing so that we can then better understand what their thoughts are, as in the crucible. Now, this isn't only about literary texts, it's about all kinds of texts. So if we say that everything in the world is a text, we can see this also be fruitful in other arenas. This is not something that just stays in this classroom, right? Currently, in our times, there are controversies over Confederate monuments. And there are controversies over whether they should be taken down or not. Some people say that taking them down is erasing history. Others say that we shouldn't be exalting racists or people who fought for racist causes. It's a hard thing our country is going through right now, and it's hard to come to common understandings. So one thing that is helpful is to look at the historical context of the text. So if we say Robert E. Lee here in this statue is the text, what was the historical context in which he was quote unquote written? Or maybe we would say erected, all right, in this case. And we can see that at different times throughout history, there were surges in the erection of Confederate monuments. All right, and we can see that the peaks happened post-Reconstruction, all right, and during the Civil Rights era, times when there was a backlash to African American progress. So, what does that mean? All right, how does knowing that historical context, knowing that these statues were not built in the immediate aftermath of the Confederate, of the Civil War, they were not built then, but then sometimes later, during moments of progress for African American citizens, how does that change our understanding of those statues? Does that historical context change the way we think about things? All right. So, knowing the historical context of a text does not lead you to unlock all the meanings of that text, but it does add a wrinkle. It adds interest, it adds complexity, and it adds a lot of meaning to our interaction with the text. A text that in this class we're going to read so that we can understand how someone else, some author back there, started to make sense of their world. And in turn, we can make sense of our world through studying